Good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 89. And always I do that, but there we go. I don't see a way of avoiding it, actually. Anyway, as always, I'm going to start us off with you.
I'm lonesome since I crossed the hill, and all the more I've had. Such heavy thoughts my heart to fill since parting from my side. I seek no more the final hill, for each cup but remind her how swiftly crossed the arms away with the girl I left behind. I seek no more the final hill, for each cup but remind how swiftly crossed the arms away with the girl I left behind. Oh, there shall I forget such nights, the stars that rise above, and gently lends the silvery light when far she far too long. But now I'm bound to brighten her, ever that they guide, and bring me safely back again to the girl I left behind. But now I'm bound to brighten camp, ever that they guide me, and bring me safely back again to the girl I left behind me. The ringlets fair, her eyes like diamonds shine. Her step always with carriage chase me leave the sweet behind. Ye gods above, all hear my prayer to my beauteous fair to bind. Ye gods and send me back again to the girl I left behind. Ye gods above, all hear my prayer to my beauteous fair to bind. Send me safely home again.
Okay, so that was a nice rendition of the traditional British tune, The Girl I Left Behind Me, with some scenes from the excellent film Waterloo, which I do suggest people go and watch. Okay. How are my guests doing this evening? AI, how are you going, mate?
I'm doing well, thanks. It's been a very dramatic week and a bit. In the UK, I imagine also yourself in the Commonwealth as well. I mean, it's been one heck of a week, really.
Oh yeah, absolutely. As you know, we have a moratorium on talking about anything political around Her late Majesty the Queen until after her funeral, which is in a couple of days' time. Yeah, I mean, look, I was much sadder regarding her death than I expected to be honest. Definitely the end of an era. But, you know,
yeah.
Long live the king. And let's hope he does a good job. He's been okay so far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
There are some red flags, but time will tell.
There's also some white pills as well.
Yeah.
With him.
It's been a mixture, I do believe. Adam, again, we'll talk about this probably next week because I think that's fine. I like the reason we're not talking about politics around the monarchy is because of just traditional respect. You know, we're a traditional group of people, and that's what we do. So, but yeah, I look, he's done some good things, as Adam says. There's some other things that I have issues with, perhaps, but we will see. Alaman, how are you going, mate?
Yeah, good, you?
Yeah, not at all bad. Did you have a first subject you wanted to bring up, Alaman, just to open us this evening?
Well, the only thing we can really talk about, I suppose, is Martha's Vineyard mess in America.
Well, that's certainly one thing we can talk about, so yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's still an unfolding news story, but yeah, essentially, it looks like Ron DeSantis just flew. Was it 50 migrants to
45, I believe.
45? Yeah. So really not. And the thing is, I actually had a quick look just a bit earlier today at Martha's Vineyard on Google Maps. It's a pretty big empty island. For all the constant talk you hear from these people that, well, you could just, look at the population density. You could fit way more people into this place or that place or whatever. They could have absolutely housed those people on that island with very little effort, and they still didn't.
It's also like one of the richest places on the American East Coast.
Yeah.
And very liberal, supposedly. And
Yeah.
I think it was a good move on Ron DeSantis' part because it really exposes the hypocrisy, doesn't it?
Mm.
Mm.
Is it the Obamas that have a house on that island, or is it another?
I think many rich Americans have places on that island, yes, which are mostly empty, of course, when they're not there.
Kamala Harris has a property on that island. The Obamas, I don't know if the Obamas do, but I know they frequent the island quite often. They had I think they had like a wedding reception for a family member there or something not so long ago. So yeah, I mean it's a very I think it's in the state of Massachusetts, if I'm correct.
Yeah, technically, yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's a well-known, like, pretty rich place in the US.
Yeah,
they're just such hypocrites.
I'm wondering because someone just brought up the Kennedys. Is it maybe Andrew, you might remember this? Teddy Kennedy, when he, it was in that car crash and he let that girl drown. Remember that?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that a different part of Massachusetts?
I'm not sure if it was actually Martha's Vineyard, but it was somewhere close to it for sure.
Yeah, because that was like a sort of fairly wealthy area. Because I know they kind of tried to cover it up because he left the scene as well. He didn't just let it die. He just sort of legged it.
Yeah, he wasn't a good chap as far as I'm concerned, I have to say.
Yeah.
I definitely wasn't a good chap. I think Rupert August is going to be joining us shortly. So yeah. John Best in the chat says they have an 8-bedroom compound. I presume he's talking about the Obamas.
Right.
Yeah, I'm having a look at it now. Actually, it's a pretty big place.
Yeah.
And apparently, it also comes up on Flood IQ, which is a sort of a. They're describing it here as a climate alarmist site, pushing about rising sea levels. Apparently, this is like right in like the red zone.
Yeah.
So,
that's probably why they moved those illegal immigrants, because they didn't want them to drown.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, that they were gone. They were bust out in like
not even 48
was it 12 hours?
Yeah, it wasn't 48 hours. I know.
No, less than a day. You couldn't because they were just. I mean, I guess they were like all walking around the street and everything, and the people were getting. The neighbors, the locals were getting nervous and everything, and it's well, welcome to our world. And the response from it has been amazing. It's like first the response was, well, we're not a border state, we can't facilitate 45 people.
No, absolutely, we don't have room with all these holiday homes that we have.
There was an NBC article that read, Florida Governor DeSantis sending asylum seekers to Martha's Vineyard is like, quote, me taking my trash out and just driving to different areas where I live and throwing my trash there, said a founding member of a foundation which helped refugees.
Oh, that is spicy. Comparing illegal immigrants to trash, that's spicy.
Yeah, from a liberal who used to who was pro mass immigration and no open borders and all the rest of it. But I mean, for God's sake, gents, we know that the left are like entirely hypocrites. They just are.
Yeah, I was going to say on the story now, and I think Andrew, you just sort of got to the point what I was going to say, but I view this tactic by Ron DeSantis, and I see someone in chat saying that there's going to be another so they're going to do it like with Aspen in Colorado, which would also be hilarious as well because it's like a skiing resort town.
Yes.
a very liberal place as well. But overall, it has very little political impact, because you're not going to convince any. The thing there is, you're not going to convince anybody who is a Democrat now, because if you look at Democrat sort of media spaces, they're sort of, the narrative is, oh, evil GOP are kidnapping people and sending them to to dropping them off in sort of random places in blue states, and it's just like the Holocaust and everything. And the problem is that, as you said, it's just power with them. That you can't say you can't have the tactics, or the Dems are the real racists, or that they're hypocrites, because you're pointing out the hypocrisy doesn't work. But what this could be used for as an alternative is to give that boost for the midterms, for Republican voters and independents who tend to vote Republican, to get out there and vote. But it is interesting to see why DeSantis and also Tony Abbott in Texas has been doing this as well. He's been doing it to sending buses to New York with people. So I mean, I don't know why. I think there's elements of just the build up to the midterms, getting some the attention on this, because it goes down well with his base and everything. So I think it might just be some the build up to election and sort of thing. But I mean, overall, it's not practical in the sense of a strategy, but it's a good exercise to sort of moralize your base in the short term.
Oh, look, you are never going to convince the vast majority of left wingers, like overwhelmingly, like 99.9.5% of them. You're never going to change their mind because they're closed-minded. But as you rightly say, AI, it will remind Republican voters of the hypocrisy of the left, which is always worth doing. Because although, like people like us, we know how hypocritical they are, a lot of the normies don't. So it's always worth reminding them,
Yeah.
And I'm sure those people are being bused to Chicago or New York or somewhere like that, where they will help diversify some poor white working class district. But I mean, that's just the way they do things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I will say though, also the key is that. So I assume you're talking about the Ron DeSantis.
Sending them to Martha's Vineyard. Yeah,
exactly. So the key is also just an economy of political capital, I guess. So how much does it cost us versus how much does it cost them in order to make this display of hypocrisy? So if it's very public for them to have to rebuke their own values whilst costing us very little, then that's something. Well, it's a win basically. But if it's costing us a lot to point out their hypocrisy, which they can easily bury, then it's not something that's worth pursuing. So that is always a consideration. But it seems like something that we haven't really had to burn many bridges in order to do, because they, you may have seen all the signs up saying basically, we accept all refugees, we help all people in need, and etc. And now they have to go through the optics, assuming they're sufficiently public, of deporting all these people and getting them off their land.
Well, I'm sure.
I'm not sure if anyone's seen, but is it Gavin Newsom is now talking about trying to get Merrick Garland to prosecute DeSantis on some sort of human trafficking style charge.
Yeah. And that's sort of, I mean, we're seeing in publications today that DeSantis and Abbott, Abbott for a while has been accused of human trafficking. With that, there's also been accusations of comparing it to the mid-century Germans and everything else. And the problem is in all of this is that time will play out to see whether this would be a win or not in the long term when it comes to it. And as I say, I do believe pointing out leftist hypocrisy is just a waste of time at this point. But the key for this to turn to win is if let's just say the people who are independents who would vote, maybe voted for Obama, then voted Trump or something like that sort of demographic. if they're sort of able to get the Republican information of look at them, they look at what they're doing, they're full of they're full of crap, okay, or they're going to consume the vast majority of media where the Democrats are just saying, look at these human traffickers. Oh, and also the latest thing is, I feel the other thing I'm seeing from Democrats is, oh, aren't you DeSantis and co? You're supposed to be Christians. It's not very Christian of you, is it? Saying coming from the rampant atheists who don't believe in any sort of conviction in the Bible or anything like that.
Well, it's just yet more leftist hypocrisy. I mean, if the left didn't have hypocrisy, they wouldn't be able to speak, basically.
Yeah, but remember, it's not hypocrisy; it's hierarchy.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a hierarchy of who's top of the the progressive stack. But I mean, look, this Martha's Vineyard place has this great big sign on their website saying, all Black Lives Matter, and we think everyone's great, and we believe in all these dreamers and all the rest of it. And they've just been shown as the total hypocrites they really are.
Yeah.
I mean, and that is going to go through to quite a lot of common sense Americans. And I'm a firm believer that the vast majority of ordinary people have some degree of common sense left, despite the constant brainwashing from the mainstream media, etc.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if anyone would actually flip, but there is a potential win. And if I'm going to draw a historical comparison, then potentially what it contributes towards is something like the situation in the early 20th century Russia, where basically all of the optimism was just destroyed, such that eventually everybody just became apathetic to the possibility of like a more positive solution in any direction. And that can work basically towards anybody who's kind of willing to put the force on the ground and actually mobilize a group of committed activists, basically. And so if you have one group or a number of groups who are able to be utilized in that way, then that becomes the operative factor rather than just relying on mass demographics of electoral voting blocks. It just changes the field, basically.
Yeah, well said, Rupert August, and welcome to the stream, by the way. I don't know if you realise you don't have an avatar at the moment. You usually have this rather nice English Civil War avatar, but don't worry about it.
Yeah, sorry, I'm joining from my phone at the moment, so hopefully the audio quality isn't too bad.
It's all right. There's a bit of background noise, but it's fine, mate. Don't worry.
Yeah, don't miss your train, Rupert.
St. Thomas Aquinas says, God bless me. Trust me, I need it, guys. Really, I've done some bad things in my time. I was a soldier for a long time. So, but yeah, thank you. Thank you, St. Thomas Aquinas. But yeah, I just think what was going on there is good. I don't totally think DeSantis is a great dude. Like some people will think he's the best thing since sliced bread. I doubt it, but then I'm a cynic. But yeah, I think that was an absolutely excellent move. And like as I said, if the left didn't have hypocrisy, they wouldn't be able to speak at all. But
I mean, yeah, but a lot of people are negative on DeSantis. I mean, this was something that Curtis Yarvin actually brought up at the event. He sort of pointed out that DeSantis probably doesn't have much in the way of morals and just goes wherever the wind blows. I mean, that's still got utility. I mean, if we can get a few politicians to appeal to us even from a position of self-interest, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
No, I totally agree. Look, I mean, I know that Don the Pleb, for example, has said this very often. Like, we have to take the wins where we can get them. We have no power on the right. The real right has no real power. So we have to take every single win we can get. And as far as I'm concerned, that thing with Martha's Vineyard was definitely a win.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll have to wait and see. I'm not sure if it's quite a win yet, but it can be. I think that because you get a lot of people will say this about like Viktor Orban, right? People will say, well, Viktor Orban's not that based, and it's like, well, not being funny, but if he ran here in the UK, we'd all be voting for him. So
Well, I mean, Viktor Orban is an interesting example because he, like, one of the complaints in Hungary is that they never had their kind of like transition moment. So he very much is like in the exact same continuity as the communist government that he replaced.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of the complaint comes from there, where they haven't had their big break moment where they've been able to transition.
I would recommend.
So, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Rupert, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add that he is exactly an example of this phenomenon where the domestic politics were such that he went with the wind, and the wind was leading in a good direction, as we would say.
I was just going to add, because there's a video on my channel. Maybe if you want viewers can check it out. I talk about it's by a Hungarian politician who's not with Viktor Orban's party, but it's the other sort of more the sort of further right party than Viktor Orban's. I forgot what they're called now, but he did he put together a forward that was from Julius Evers, a youth guide to right-wing politics. I think that was, or something along those lines. And I did like a sort of review on it. And what was quite interesting is he actually went through how Evola sort of put together in a series of essays how to organize a sort of right-wing youth, but also just like right-wing sort of communities in general. And one thing that's really fascinating by Hungary is that, and this is probably why Viktor Orban is in power and why this other right-wing party springing up, is he actively got rid of not just your NGOs, but just every sort of Western charity, things that are that cause the infection in societies. He just got away with it, and that's why in Hungary why there is so much support. I mean, I know in the last election there was actually all the sort of liberal pro-EU globalist parties had to unite together, and they were hammered in the elections. They actually lost seats combined, while Viktor Orban's party and this other I can't remember the other name. I think it's called Jobbik or something like that. This like the other far right party.
Jobbik. They became centrist though. Weirdly, it's a very strange story.
Yeah.
Sorry,
well, but regardless, that what's quite interesting is that he actually took a more different approach on this, where he identified that anything that has American backing, like NGO charity groups, even down to like your more obscure like LGBT youth group in like some random town or something, he just banned all of it. And he had people, and he replaced civil servants. He put his own civil servants, like people like his own sort of managerial class in charge. And that's why he's in a strong position in Hungary. And that's why, I mean, I actually do think, as Ron says there, I mean, Hungary it should really show us the way of how to do this, because they've managed to keep their society functional. They don't have to import ridiculous amounts of people, and it's a fairly safe and stable society. You can walk through the streets of any city in Hungary and you're not going to be stabbed, run over, or beaten up by a gang of engineers, doctors, and rocket scientists.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. And also recently, I mean, like just last week, I think the EU were slagging off Orban and Hungary. And to me, anyone who the EU slags off is probably a good guy, to be honest. I'm at that stage these days. So,
Well, it comes back around to what I was saying, though, is that if they have to go a level higher and make a very public display of ostracizing him and bringing down the hammer of the European courts on him, then that's quite a costly move in terms of political capital. So forcing them to have to make that move is the closest thing to a win you can get in this kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean, the thing though is, with Hungary, one thing that's quite interesting is the way that he sort of Viktor Orban has set the game in his country. Is the more attacks that are against him, the more popular he gets. I mean, he's reached approval ratings in, like I think at one point it got close to 80% approval rate, which is insane. And I actually, if you look at the election results on the ground, it's not election shenanigans on his part. It's genuine support by the people, because of the way the media functions there as well. They're actually showing what what the EU and what the European courts are actually doing. And the more they attack him, the stronger he gets. I actually think that if they wanted to pull a colour revolution in Hungary, I don't think they could do it now, because they haven't got the people on the ground to do it now, because Viktor Orban has done away with them.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I suspect he's basically in the same kind of boat as Russia in that regard. I mean, I know more about Russia just because I've kind of read more around the subject, but yeah, it's the same kind of situation in Russia, basically. So Hungary is very rapidly being lumped into the same kind of boat, because they have immunized themselves from that same phenomenon. They're no longer vulnerable to the exact kind of attacks that Western aligned or US aligned interests would use to attack them.
Exactly, and that's why Putin. Well, I mean, why he has historically been in a sort of winning state. Why Lukashenko in Belarus again? He he did have Western problems, Western agitators in Belarus, but he was able, with the support of Russia, to fend that off. But the thing though is, I mean, people like Putin and Viktor Orban, I mean, they've done what's needed to prevent a colour revolution, and there would have to be a full-on invasion, I think, of Hungary to oust him at this point.
Well, the danger is that they do actually end up trying to do that for one reason or another, because, I mean, it's been sort of memory hold, but they did actually try a colour revolution against Russia in 2011 to 2013. If you want to look it up, it's called the Snow Revolution.
Yeah, I remember it as well. It was like a series of protests, wasn't it, at the end? You had, I know that, I think also in that one, wasn't there like US officials trying to reach out to Russian military to try and encourage them to do, to sort of do
a coup.
Yeah, like a military coup along with it as well. Because the trouble is, they're so predictable, because they pull the same stuff. Like if you look at Ukraine and in the 2014 revolution,
the color revolution, exactly, 100%. Yeah, where you had what was it, Madeleine Albright saying, yes, this person can join the Ukrainian government and this person can't. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I mean, look, as Ataman said earlier, I mean, if someone like Viktor Orban ran in Britain or Australia or what have you, I think most of us would vote for him. In fact, I think all of us would vote for him. So, so yeah, absolutely, totally agree with that. Ataman, you brought this up. Did you have any closing thoughts on it?
No. I mean, there's an aspect to which, well, I mean, one of the things that I always found kind of funny is that there's a lot of people on the dis right who've actually come to be a little pro EU. And this sort of came up right after Brexit, where people would say that essentially it was the UK that was sort of the direct injection of American POS into the European Union, and that with us gone, they would
bullshit, Adam. That was British independence, traditional British independence.
Yeah. And the idea was that with Britain gone, it would kind of default to a type almost. But I mean,
well, yeah,
we've actually kind of seen that actually they've probably gotten like the EU as a bureaucratic entity has kind of actually gotten worse at sort of pushing this sort of modern way of life onto member states, even like Hungary. I don't think they would have thought about doing what they're doing to Hungary now, sort of 10 years ago.
Yeah, but Richard Spencer likes it, Armin. Richard Spencer's a big pro-EU guy. This is what I don't understand. You'll get the same people on the dissident right turning around and saying Richard Spencer is a Fed, which maybe he is, I don't know. He's either a Fed or an idiot or both, but or he's just trying to get back into the mainstream, which I think is probably more likely. But you get the same people on the right who will say Richard Spencer's a glow in the dark, who will then turn around and say, "Oh yeah, but the EU is really a good idea, really." It's just you can't have it all ways. You've got to make your mind up about what you're going to support.
it's delusional because they in their mind they're sort of have these delusional takes that this is going to be like some wonderful ethno state, when of course it's not. Where it's just not the case. And on the point of Britain being the injector of POS and everything, I mean, I don't think that is entirely true. I think Britain does produce its own POS. That is a fair statement from America, but I think the real injection of POS in Europe really comes probably via certain cities in France and Germany, particularly in Germany, mainly, and this mainly you can trace this back to the I don't know if I can say the word on here, but Germanification, the mid-century German,
mid 20th century Germans, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
it's called N. You get the idea.
Yes.
You get the idea. Now, if you look at the method, because it was all American sort of propaganda machine, but what you have to remember, it wasn't just, they didn't just tackle the mid-century Germans' time in office. They actually did, and I watched this really good propaganda video. I think it was called The German People, and it was actually an American one for American troops going into post-war Germany, where they said it's not just about the political party of the mid-century German. It's actually built in their DNA. It's their history and culture, which is just so wickedly evil. And we need to basically just we need to sort of be there to just force it out of them. And when you look at that, it then sort of becomes clearer why German people have become atomized, why they can't really connect with their history and culture. And then when you spread that out to France and to other and then of course with Spain and everything, and Italy and everything, you that's how you see like this self-hatred of your own civilization, of your own history.
Because they've been subjected to so much
it's psychological.
Anti-German.
Yeah, it's like a what they call it, kinetic psychological warfare or something like that.
Yeah,
it really is.
Right.
Absolutely
right.
And that, if you want to know that, but that's from American influence. And I am actually of the belief now that America in the Cold War. I think the Soviet Union was. I'm not saying they were the good guys, but I think America was definitely the worst. The America and the influence of America was.
I'm not gonna totally agree with you on that one. I
do. Spicy, but I agree.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, I understand why you do, but like, bear in mind, back then Russia was the Soviet Union, and it was still communist. So I'm no fan of communists whatsoever. I just want to point out that Steve has corrected me in the chat, and that it was not Madeleine Albright, it was Victoria Nuland who was doing that with the Ukrainian government. I also wanted to point out, if I can find it, that Ron Muller says he was sent here by Sergeant Sniper and Don the Pleb, who are both in my Discord, by the way. So yeah, well, welcome, Ron Muller. I like Sergeant Sniper, and I like Don the Pleb, and I've streamed with Don the Pleb quite a few times. So yeah. All right. I think we've probably.
Can I actually be the lone dissenting dissenting voice then on the EU question, because it's not actually a new idea. It was put forward by de Gaulle, and that's part of the reason why de Gaulle never wanted the UK in the EU in the earlier instances. Because
de Gaulle knew the English, or the British anyway, looked towards the oceans and the world and not Europe.
Well, I think there's probably a linguistic thing about it as much as anything, but just the factor of. Oh, 1 second. Oh, no, okay, never mind. So basically, he foresaw that Britain would be a thin end of the wedge, essentially, for American influence in the EU. Whereas I suspect, but don't know for sure, that he wanted to turn it into essentially a separate power that could be more autonomous in the face of both the Soviet Union and the US. Obviously, I think 1 year ago that that is probably an easier case to make than it is now in light of what's happened with Ukraine. But yeah, I do think there's some merit to the idea that the EU has almost necessarily become more amenable to European interests. You know, minus the fact that they've decided to commit collective economic suicide via the sanctions regime at the behest of the US.
The sanctions regime and also watermelon green idiot policies.
It's all part of the same thing.
And look at what they've just done to Orban, as we were just talking about, Orban and Hungary. They just made a big deal about basically calling Orban a fascist, really.
Well, I mean, I'll point out just to Rupert's point. When I brought up the point, I'm not saying that I don't think there's any legitimacy. Like America definitely uses both Britain and also large parts of the EU as an entry point into the continent for their interests, both financial and otherwise. But I just think it was a bit silly of some people. Maybe not silly, but maybe a bit preemptive of some people to assume that just with us gone, it would sort of free up Europe in some way.
Well, I mean, if you look at what we were actually voting for, then in a lot of ways we were a corrupting influence. I mean,
yes.
Was it Boris Johnson who was and the UK in general, who were like the prime benefactors to the idea of Turkey being given being given EU membership?
Yeah.
Which they haven't got, by the way, even today. And they're not going to get, as far as I can work out. But look, listen, I'm no fan of the EU, not at all. And Ron Miller in the chat is saying America was worse than the Soviet Union during the Cold War. I guess you're not speaking Russian today. Look, I was in the British Army during the Cold War, and honestly, we had an immediate action for when the nuclear stuff started. If the Soviets invaded Western Europe, and it was basically bend over and kiss your ass goodbye. Look, back then, yeah. Well, like that, NATO back then made sense. I don't think it does today, to be honest. Because, like, I don't think Russia, as opposed to the communist Soviet Union, I don't think Russia, as opposed to the communist Soviet Union, is particularly an enemy of Britain. And why Britain gives a shit about who runs Ukraine, or the USA gives a shit about who runs Ukraine, is beyond my brain. And obviously, I'm a silly man.
Biden does, and that's the key thing. But I mean, on the US versus USSR thing, I mean, this isn't a view that was sort of uncontentious at the time. There was some discussion over this during the Cold War itself. So two people that come to mind are is it Francis Yockey? Yockey, in any case,
Francis
he was
and Julius Evola as well, who I
both and Enoch Powell as well.
Enoch Powell.
Enoch Powell was extremely anti-Soviet Union. Let me tell you.
Well, but he still thought that the US was the greater threat.
No, he didn't really. What he thought was that Britain needed a more independent foreign policy, which I agree with.
Yeah, he was more non-aligned, and I mean, my point is
no. Don't get this wrong. Look, I've done streams with oh crikey, what was the dude's name? I've done many streams with hang on.
What, Johnny?
Yeah, I've done many streams with John Cavalier, who is a bit of an expert on Enoch Powell and who has read many of his books. And what Enoch Powell was non-aligned. He was totally anti-Soviet Union, but he did think that Britain was too influenced by American power, which is absolutely true. I'm not going to deny that at all. Ron Muller in the chat says the British Army of the Rhine's first and only course of action. That's not true, mate. Back in the day when the British Army of the Rhine was 120,000 men, before they bent over and kissed their ass goodbye, they would have killed at least twice that many Soviets. Trust me. I was in the army at the time, and we would have. But anyway, that's a different story.
I would sort of go back to, I think, one of Ron's previous point when he says about what was it? I can't. What was his previous? Yeah, America was worse than the Soviet Union? And I guess it was being rushed. I mean, my point is, I'm not saying the Soviet Union was a perfect society. Of course, they promoted state atheism, which I'm against, and everything else. But that it's undeniable that, especially in America, the signing of the Civil Rights Act and the let's say blackification of America and then its natural exports into the West has had a more civilizational destruction on our societies because of that than anything the Soviet Union or its satellite states could do.
Well, unless they took us over, of course.
Yeah, the thing there is, and this is my thing when I said when the war broke out and everything, and I said that the prospects of Britain going, if there was Britain going to war, and why I said I just don't think they would have they would have to conscript people. You wouldn't have volunteers, and I said that for once I wouldn't volunteer for one simple reason, that I wouldn't. I do not believe that Britain in its current state. I know it's going to be unpopular opinion with some of you guys, but I don't think at the moment, and I want it to be how it was, but it's not, and I don't think it's not worth. I'm not going to be fighting to defend the global American vassals in this country to keep their power, and that's something ultimately that I've is come to realize, and also look at if you in the last 2 years we've had George Floyd, we've had the destruction of statues in our country, we've had intersectional takeover of all our institutions. That's not come from Russia or the legacy of the Soviet Union. That's come from America and the liberal poison that has spilled out from that country.
And I 100% agree with you.
And I'm not.
But hang on. Let's just make clear there is a difference between the American government under the senile Biden and whoever controls it, and like a lot of pretty based American.
Yeah, I was going to. My next point was I'm not targeting Americans or American culture or the Southern Americans or the Midwesterns. I understand a lot of it's in the cities and the coastal stuff, but it is something that that the poison, and maybe it's me, but I just feel that a lot of American conservatives, people who are based, fail to realize that a lot of this crap is that it really is coming from your own country. It really and it's been coming from your own country for a long time. And the mythos that comes from we're dating back, say, from the Civil Rights Act onwards and everything, with the sort of the sort of Cold War America up till now has had terrible not just on our countries but also on your countries. Well, I mean it's your country. I don't think the founding fathers would have declared independence if they could see America what it become today.
Yeah, look, I totally agree with that. But like one of the things that I think we need to realize is that just as many British people certainly would not go along with the likes of Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, and the other British so-called political elites, there's a great number of ordinary Americans who wouldn't go along with their political elites. So we have to distinguish between the governments of our countries and the people. That's all I'm saying.
And I think it's also worth pointing out that this is why we should probably also still keep our foot firmly in American politics, even as one of the vassals, because there are a lot of good right wingers over there trying to do good work. And
absolutely
if
correct.
we can if we can help them get a foot in politics within their own nation, that can only be to our benefit here. So
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
look,
it is after all still the center of power, and it will be for quite a while yet. But you know,
well, in the Western world, I agree. I do think, I really like people like Don LeFleur, for example, or Sergeant Sniper, and like I've done many streams with Don LeFleur, and I'm absolutely certain I'd get on with him great. All right, I'd be more pro-British, he'd be more pro-American. That's natural, but we wouldn't have all that many fundamental disagreements. Where I think things get a bit mixed up is when you get some people on the right will say, oh, no, the Brits are all posed and terrible. And you get other people on the right saying, oh, the US is all posed and terrible. And neither of those are true. It's the governments and the so-called elites we're talking about, not the ordinary people. And not even the dissident right people.
It also does cut deep. It cuts deeper than also really elites. It's, if you look at the culture, and I mean, I don't want to go too much into this, but because I haven't seen it because I'm not in any interest. But the new sort of Lord of the Rings thing on Prime. I know some of us in our circles
don't watch it. Don't watch it.
we don't speak of it around here.
I never watch it. It's an insult to the late great Tolkien. Never watch it, and really we try not to speak about it because it's so vile and it's also crap.
Yes. Okay. Well, sorry I mentioned it, but my point was that there's a particular scene in there which maybe some of you have seen screenshots of, where there's a very much you can see a deliberate Americanism there, and the problem is, what has to be destroyed is not just the elites, but it's also the way I think Americans perceive themselves. I think it has to be like a real top-down cultural shift, and it really has. The reason why I sort of hark on about the civil rights era politics, that's what's dominating so much of the discourse now, especially in that series. I mean, that whole series is basically like a dissertation on like bloody Martin Luther King and all those sorts of communist communist people. So I think it's not just elites, it's also a deeper cultural problem as well. It's like when I say like it's a virus, it really is. And my point is, probably when the elites are gone, maybe it would change. Maybe America would sort of return to its English speaking roots or something. I don't know, but yeah, as people are saying, it is cultural sacrilege because nothing that is British or mythologically from the English-speaking peoples can be produced now without 80-pound black lesbians in it.
I totally agree with everything you're saying there, but I know that the vast majority of actual right-wing Americans would totally agree with that. You know, you cannot make a good Western movie now. You just can't, because it's got to be starring women and black people.
Yes indeed.
I mean, even the recent movie that what's his name made, the Jewish American guy, the Israeli American guy, what's his name, very famous, can't remember his name now, but he made a movie with that chick who got chucked out of the Star Wars show that was on TV. And like basically what this movie was this brave woman killing everybody and saving her husband. And that was made by what's his name? Adam, and you know his name. What's he called?
I kind of missed that bit. What was
Ben Shapiro?
Ben Shapiro, yeah. His company made that movie, right? And like, I didn't agree with that woman getting chucked off of the Star Wars show because she made a tweet which lefties didn't like. But like, if you watch that film, and many people supposedly on the right said that was a great movie, but if you watch it, it's her saving her husband all the way through it. So what's the difference between that and the lefty view? Well, I didn't really see it myself, but you know.
I mean, I guess one could argue both are quite subversive anyway. Sort of plays into the sort of egalitarian nature that women can do anything and everything at all times. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
Ron Muller in the chat says the show she was chucked off of was The Mandalorian. And I can't remember the Ben Shapiro movie, what it was called now, but I watched it because a lot of people on the right said, oh, yeah, it's all right. And it wasn't a terrible film, but the point was it was just her saving her husband and her kids all the way through it. And I think her husband killed one of the, like, I don't know, half a dozen bad guys in the whole movie. So why that was better than what the left produces, I'm not quite sure, to be honest, really.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say hello. Yeah, it's something in the West, Terror in the West, or something like that. And it was Gina Carano, is the name of the actress. Terror on the Prairie, it was called. God's Own Prototype, says Adam. And honestly, if you watch it, I couldn't see why it wasn't leftist, to be honest, because it was just the chick all the time saving everybody. And
apparently, she was also the producer on that film, which probably goes some way to explaining why that was.
Were her abs bigger than her husband's abs? Of interest.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, listen, I don't think she's. I'm not anti-Gina Carano at all. I'm really not anti-Gina Carano. I just think that movie was like totally unrealistic about what 19th century women or even 21st century women are really like. It's just not true. Women ain't like that. I'm sorry, they're not.
No, I mean, but I mean, all forms of film is always about a messaging, and every single shot, every single storyboard, or every single script, it is carefully planned out. When you watch something and you think you notice a bit of subversive content, it's not your mind playing tricks on you or you being sort of uber paranoid. It is in there because it's all planned out. Every bit of scene, everything is put there on purpose.
Yeah, look, I'm not against any of that. I think it's all true. We spent nearly an hour on this, so let's move on to something else. Yeah. Rupert August, did you have something you wanted to bring up as the first topic? He might be busy. He might be traveling.
Well,
so
if you've not talked about this already, I mean
yeah, carry on. Carry on, Rupert.
Can you move on to someone else? I can try and get a better situation.
No worries. AI, did you have something you wanted to bring up as the first subject?
I was going to talk about the Rings of Power, but because it's a banned stuff on the channel.
No. Look, you can talk about it in general terms. Look, it's crap.
Yeah, I haven't watched.
It's really badly written. It's not very well acted. The woman who is playing the main heroine is not a very good actress and doesn't have anything to work with, even if she was. And it is a total insult to the late great Tolkien and all the people who loved his writing. Bear in mind that Tolkien was a British gentleman in the best sense of the word. He was a British soldier who fought on the Somme in the First World War. He was a professor of Anglo-Saxon. He was a devout Christian and a Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
And he wrote Lord of the Rings specifically as English and British myth and high fantasy. And that's why most of the people in it are white, because English and British people are white, really. So, but leaving all that aside, go ahead, AI.
Yeah, so I mean, everything you said there is correct. The basis of Lord of the Rings is on, Anglo-Saxon mythology. I guess you could also say aspects of Roman mythology, wider sort of European mythologies as well. But largely, Anglo-Saxon mythology, stuff like the Ents and such, the trees and all that sort of stuff. And of course, the Shire is based in England. It's I think it's maybe like the West Midlands region, and also parts of Wales and such. There's there's some where he lived in Wales. I think there was a few locations that were sort of inspired and put in the book as well. So it's largely the British Isles and such. So there was a few screenshots that were doing about Twitter yesterday, and just to point out, I haven't watched any of the Amazon series. I wouldn't, even if I could pirate it and watch it for free, which I have the capability to do so, I wouldn't even do that because I just wouldn't waste my time.
Yeah, absolutely the same. I could watch it for nothing on a pirate site, but I just won't because I have no interest in it.
No, there was a screenshots going about, and it looked like this. I'll just give a description, but I don't know where it was. It was somewhere in maybe I think it was in Numenor or somewhere like that, if I was to guess. But there was this market. It looked like this either butcher or blacksmith chap. He was standing up on like these steps, and he had all like these very sort of multiracial humans sort of standing around who like market traders and everything, saying. You're saying our queen is helping the elves are taking our jobs and everything, and then it was like I think there was a screen where he says the elves will not replace us, and if you've read some of Moldbug's latest sort of dark elves, high elves stuff, it's there we go, elves will not replace us. So it's quite clear that this is a direct their inspiration for this is of course Orange Man and Charlottesville, and I don't want to go back to Americanisms, but because of this is a particular English European mythology where the stories that Tolkien wrote about would maybe he took inspiration from Beowulf, from ancient legendary texts and sources.
I mean, look, you can find on YouTube, in fact, Tolkien talking about Beowulf, which is really, really interesting.
Yes.
And although Tolkien was a professor of Anglo-Saxon, he was steeped not only in British and Anglo-Saxon history and myth and folklore, but he was also steeped in the history, myth, and folklore of Scandinavia and Germany as well, like basically northeastern Europe. Surprise.
The elves in his the woodland realm elves entirely based off when I say Saxon, the Saxons of Germany, Saxons, the ones that Charlemagne conquered. They believe that the elves, or the wise people, the sort of wiser lived in the forests, and they were and everything else. So there's a lot of that mythology comes from that. But I mean, his work was purely created on myth and everything. It wasn't created from from sort of just without being shit tier American political culture, which is what we all have to put up with now. And it's frustrating because it does feel like vandalism. It feels like an attempt, because and even the actresses, like one of the actresses on it who's like a young Gladriel, said before it was released that she's an actor. She says my character is an activist in this world, and it was like,
look, AI Galadriel, who is an elf and who is hundreds of years old, even because they're almost. She's almost. The elves are almost immortal in Tolkien's world.
Yeah,
but like she's hundreds of years old, even when this crap is set.
Yeah,
And of course, she was played by Kate Blanchett in the excellent trilogy of movies, which is much better. But she was never a warrior. Like she's very powerful, but her power is magic. It's not like killing people with swords, because she's a woman. And Tolkien was a very traditional British guy, and women didn't do that because they can't. They're not strong enough.
No, but also in the books,
it wouldn't even matter how much training you had. Like elves are not more powerful than humans in terms of like body mass and so on. They just have more skills.
No, I mean, but in the books and in the films, the way they display, and this is probably where you say Peter Jackson really nailed it, is that he actually did display the ancient wisdom that was emanating from Galadriel, especially in the films.
Yeah.
The ancient wisdom.
But the main thing he gets across is she's a very feminine woman. Like she's very powerful, but she's a woman. She ain't a bloke.
Yeah, and she's feminine, and she's in touch with her feminine side. Even I forgot her name. What is it? Erwin? Is it she is a warrior in the books and like in the film. She's
not really a warrior.
Not in the books. Well, she does take up the she does in the book she does kill the Witch King of Angmar.
But she's not really a warrior.
No, she's not. Okay, sorry. Let me rephrase that. She, like in the Anglo-Saxon and Norse stuff, she's not a warrior as a bit, but she's able to take up arms when needs be. But my point is even then she was still, her character was still that feminine side, that nurturing, motherly sort of figure that we did see a bit in the films, but you definitely do see a lot more in the books.
Yes, for sure. Look, listen, women make bad warriors because they don't have the bodily strength to do that stuff. They also don't have the aggression to do that stuff.
Yes.
That doesn't mean, like, if you are in a world of myth and high fantasy with magic and so on, that does not mean they can't be powerful. And indeed, like ordinary women can be very powerful, if they're beautiful and they have something about them, as some women do, that they can be very powerful people. But they ain't men. They don't do the same stuff as men do. This is what all the lefty Hollywood morons, lefty liberal Hollywood morons get wrong, is that they try and make strong women be like blokes when strong women are nothing like blokes. In fact, they're probably the stronger the woman, the more opposite to men they really are.
Yes, and this is the problem with the new Rings of Power, that the parts that I've seen is that it basically it accepts the worldview of liberalism and egalitarianism in its total format, and the problem is number one, it's a lie, and also number two, it doesn't actually, it's anti-civilizational in nature. And so what the problem that you get from this, and why I go back to it, is when you actually look at it, it's just it's like high American fantasy. And as much of a person, I talk about Star Wars a lot on my channel, and I've promoted a lot of stuff. Now I understand Star Wars is American, it's American culture and everything. It's space westerns, it's a space opera western and all that.
I always wanted the Empire to win in Star Wars, but that's just me.
Well, yes, and I'm very much a fan of the prequels and everything. Even though, I mean, this is the thing, and even George Lucas, maybe because he's a lover of myth, of Greek mythology, of Hindu and Eastern mythology. He was able to put together a story where it did have equality and egalitarianism in it, but he still had characters that would lean into that feminine role and it wouldn't go too far, not compared to the Disney crap that's out today. But yeah, I mean, overall, the problem is the new Rings of Power sort of stuff. It's in America. It's like a high American fantasy of that. None of it is really Lord of the Rings, and also just all Tolkien's world. But also, what I've seen is that there's articles coming out trying to say that Tolkien, saying that Lord of the Rings has nothing to do with Christianity or Roman Catholicism, and they are even saying that Tolkien, even Tolkien said it had nothing to do with Roman Catholicism, even though there's an interview which you can find out on YouTube right now. If you after this stream go and have a look, where Tolkien, he is interviewed by I think BBC in the 70s, in the early 70s. And they talk about his faith and everything with it, and he goes, well, yeah, actually, I think the Middle Earth is and my work is inspired on Christianity and my Roman Catholic upbringing, and that's what he says. And they just
but Tolkien hated allegory.
Yeah, but what he said was he didn't want the world of his creation to take the place of religion and Roman. He didn't want people to be inspired from Roman Catholicism by his work,
Tolkien was friends with the chap who wrote the Narnia stories, wasn't he?
C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis, and the C.S. Lewis Narnia stories are, I would say, pretty overtly Christian. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very.
Aslan is like, it's not hard to see. But then the Narnia stories are written for children, basically. Yeah. Like I remember once spending an afternoon making a nice shield for my boy when he was going to go into a play at school where he was going to play one of the kids in that story. But Tolkien didn't agree with that. Tolkien tried to keep that stuff separate because what Tolkien was trying to do was write myth and high fantasy for England and to a lesser degree Britain, because what he always said was that because of the Norman invasion under William the Bastard in 1066, Britain lost most of her ancient myths. I mean, what have we got? We've got obviously Beowulf, but like that's more Scandinavian than really. But
the Wanderer, which is an unnamed Anglo-Saxon chronicler.
Okay, yeah.
And you got the Venerable Bede, which has he's the one that is pretty much the sort of first person. Well, not the first person, but the first major history of Roman Britain and everything.
Well, he's the Venerable Bede is kind of one of the last. How would you put it? Romano-British dudes, I guess, is the best way I would describe it. Or Romano-British tradition kind of dudes. But then apart from that, all we've really got is you've got Robin Hood, which I think is pretty authentic Anglo-Saxon myth. And there are people who have even been able to point to guys who he might have been derived from. But then apart from that, all you've got is King Arthur, and that is basically Anglo-Norman stuff and French, far more than British, really.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell where these stories originate from. I mean, there's with the sad passing of Her Majesty, there was a story going around that the royal beekeepers at Balmoral went and informed the bees that Her Majesty had passed away, and apparently this is like actually quite an ancient thing where you go and tell the bees secrets, like an information, and then inform them of stuff. And
I got no problem with that.
And like with in the Saxon times, they would go and talk to the trees and everything. And we don't know how far these myths go back. Some say they go back, into sort of high medieval, maybe even older. But I mean, the problem is a lot of these things we don't know how far they go back because, of course, events like the Normans and such. There's not. It's hard to tell because a lot of people didn't write all that information down.
But all I'm saying here, AI, is that compared with, say, Scandinavia or Germany, Britain has far less myths.
Yes, definitely, and that's why I mean, definitely. The Tudors were the Tudors very much leaned into the King Arthur legend, both because mainly they were of a Welsh house of origin. And they very much played into that sort of Norman, sort of Anglo-Norman Celtic. I guess they were sort of striving for like a.
All right. But I mean, let's look at St. George. St. George, the real St. George, was a Greek-speaking Roman soldier.
Yeah.
And every single St. George's Day, you'll see all the leftists on Twitter turn around and say, "Oh, he was a Turk," which of course he wasn't. Yeah, which of course he wasn't, because in those days there were no Turks anywhere near that part of the world. But hang on, let me finish and you can carry on. But he wasn't a Turk; he was a Greek-speaking Roman soldier, and English troops first used St. George as a battle cry during the Third Crusade under crikey, I can't remember his name.
The Lionheart.
Yeah, Richard the Lionheart. That was the first time. Now, many, but not, in fact, most, but not all of Richard the Lionheart's knights were Normans, not Saxons. But most of his ordinary soldiers were Anglo-Saxons, and that was in the 1100s. And that was the first time the English used St. George as a battle cry. And then under subsequent kings, going up to, say, Henry V, the cult of St. George was encouraged.
Yes.
And you also have at least two English bowmen, English war bowmen, under Henry V, who were made sirs, like they were knighted and became men at arms. So and again, this is English exceptionalism, which is something that I am absolutely in favour of because I think it's true. Simple Pirate says Richard didn't care for England. Well, maybe he didn't, but he spent his first 9 years in England, and he was careful to take mostly English soldiers with him when he went to the Middle East, when he defeated Saladin several times. So,
because I see this a lot. People say Richard didn't care. Do we actually know that for sure? Because it was like his kingdom.
No, we don't know that for sure.
Because I find it very hard for because you have to remember, he under that time, you had the Kingdom of England, which is England as we know it today, Normandy, Aquitaine. Was it Anjou as well, which was part of the English sort of
it was a big kind of empire, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure he did. I don't believe he was flippant and go, whatever about England, screw those guys. I don't. Yeah, he was from. He spoke French. He was from. That he wasn't from England and everything. But I don't.
But he spent his first 9 years in England, and could speak English.
Yeah, so I don't believe he didn't care about England. I mean, from my understanding, the sort of hostilities between England and France kind of stems when you get the later on in the Plantagenet years, when you actually have who was the ones that replaced the Carpets? Was it Values? Yeah, that's when you had
the Bourbons.
Oh, the Bourbons. Yeah. That's when you really had the sort of I guess you could say the sort of cultural separation and hostilities.
Hang on a minute, AI. Minoan says the Saxons were replaced. No, they weren't. The Anglo-Saxons were never replaced until at least 1949. That was the first time that started to happen.
Yeah, so if you look at the Doomsday Book, I think in the Doomsday Book they said that the when 40, I think it was 42,000 Normans, French, Dutch, people part of the invasion force, because not all of them were Normans. Some of them were like from Anjou, some of them were from Flanders, because of course he was married to was it Matilda of Flanders and everything. Yet you had all these sorts of people who would come over. There was like 42,000. Now the population of England, according to the Doomsday Book, give or take, it was about 2.5 million.
Yeah.
So that's
it's a tiny minority. Look, Minoan is saying that the Victorians damaged our understanding of history and Victorian dross. Not true, mate. I'm sorry, it's just not. But Richard the Lionheart would not have got anywhere without his English soldiers, who were mostly Anglo-Saxons. Wouldn't have got anywhere. Certainly wouldn't have beat Saladin several times as he did.
Well, I mean, my question would be also is that if I remember correctly, he bore the standard of the Three Lions, right?
Yep.
And by that time in history, because of course that's the House of Normandy, that's the legacy of the House of Normandy, which then became, by that time it was synonymous. Three Lions was synonymous with England. So he didn't have to use that standard if he didn't want to on Crusade, but he still used it.
Well, he was the King of England, and that was
why
he was powerful. He was powerful. He wouldn't have been as powerful as the Duke of Normandy.
Well, that's my point, because he understood that England was the superior, because it was the kingdom, it was the superior bit, and so he didn't have to use that standard in battle, but he chose to use it. So,
well, I mean, he could have taken like loads of troops from France to the Holy Land, but he took the nearest army.
The nearest comparison that comes to mind would be the Kingdom of Sardinia, Piedmont. It's like asking if the king in Piedmont cared about Sardinia. Well, maybe, because it gives him his kingdom title, and it makes him a king, because otherwise his other territories don't afford him the title of king, but ultimately they're not the most profitable and most populous parts of his kingdom. So,
but they were in the case of Richard the Lionheart.
Yeah,
no, they weren't. France was more populous.
No, but he didn't run all of France. He only ran bits of it.
Yeah,
he ran a lot of the most profitable and populous parts.
Yeah, Rupert, he did. He ran many of the richest parts, because why not? But he didn't run most of it, and the French were constantly attacking him there. Whereas in England, he did not have that problem.
No, and also remember, back in his time, if you were to approach your average person on the street who knew about this sort of stuff, your average nobleman, let's say, and you talk about the Kingdom of France, in their mind, the Kingdom of France is Paris and a few surrounding territories around Paris. It wasn't, because you'd be thinking of the King's territory in France. I do think, though, that because I see a lot of it, especially from the left, this Richard didn't like England, didn't care about England. I do see this as a bit of like a BS liberal revisionist take.
Yes, absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. I don't disagree with that.
I have yet to see really just any proof that was the case.
I said, he spent his first 9 years in England, and he certainly could speak English, because all these nurses would have spoken to him in English. But, Adaman, you got anything to add to this bit?
Only to take it back to the original subject.
Oh, was it the Rings of Power?
Yeah, but actually point out, has anyone seen that Star Trek show on Amazon Prime?
No.
Picard, the newest one.
Oh, I've never watched it, but I'm told it's awful.
I've only seen clips of it, but they basically have a storyline in the latest season that that was on earlier in the year, where Picard has to go back to essentially prevent Trump from getting elected. Seems to be where they're going with it. They don't say it outwardly, but they have this bit where this guy is going like, oh, you know, that the Federation in this alternate universe turns into like a fascistic sort of state, you know, intergalactic, whatever. And he goes, oh, it all started in 2024.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with all what you're saying here, gents. But let me just say, we've been going for an hour. We've been going for 119 minutes, and almost everything we've been talking about, although ostensibly Tolkien was writing about England. Apparently, that's not true anymore. We've done an awful lot of American stuff on this stream, and this is a British and Old Commonwealth stream. And for anyone watching, the Old Commonwealth was Great Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and back in the day South Africa. That's the Old Commonwealth. The rest of it, I don't give two shits about, frankly.
Newfoundland as well.
Sorry.
Wasn't Newfoundland?
Newfoundland was separate from Canada, even at the beginning of the First World War. Quite true. But when I say Canada, I'll include Newfoundland in that. But I think Newfoundland is the right way to pronounce that, by the way. So look, we've been doing an awful lot of American subjects. I'm not against doing stuff that relates to the United States. And I have American friends, like I said, like Don the Pleb, etc. But let's make this a bit more British. Rupert August, did you have a first subject you would like to bring up, mate?
Yeah, so if you've not already covered it, it's pretty interesting to see some of the stuff with King Charles III and how there's been like a massive change in popularity, basically. Like there's been a 30-point shift or something like that in whether he'd be a good king, according to polling. And there's even been
going upwards, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. And there's also been a massive increase in the amount of support for the idea of him taking on a more direct role on issues that he feels strongly about. Now, granted, that comes from the perspective of framing the question in terms of his ecological concerns. But that's definitely quite an interesting shift to see in such a short period of time. You know, like 2 months ago, this is basically unthinkable, but all of a sudden, here we are.
Well, this is because a lot of people, including Peter Hitchens, used to say that the monarchy will probably, die in large part with the Queen. And I always kind of had the inclination that no, like, the Queen isn't necessarily popular because she's a sweet little old lady. She's popular because she's the Queen, because it's this position of authority, and people largely rally around that. And obviously now we've got Charles III incoming, and immediately he's seeing huge increases in popularity. It seems pretty obvious, that people rally around like this symbol of overt strength, which is what he is, and yeah, it's been kind of fun watching people cope over it, but we'll have to see how it pans out.
I tell you, I made an oath when I joined the British Army at 18 years old to support Her Majesty the Queen, and I always took that very seriously because it was my own oath and I believed in it. But I wasn't sure about how I would feel about Charles, but you know what? Charles is my king. Sorry. So
Laurie in the chat said
unless he does something goddamn awful, I'm going to support him.
Yeah. Laurie in the chat said doesn't saying "God save the King" feel so much more robust and proactive? Yeah, it does.
Well, it's much more common. It's much through British history. Like there's only really been there's been more than that, but there's only been like 3 or 4 British queens. The vast majority of British monarchs have been kings, obviously.
Yes, and I will say this, that there's, of course, in the wake of Her Majesty's death, there has been a few things going around social media with King Charles from I guess people from our side who've been pointing out some interesting things that he's done, especially philosophers who's on this reading list. One of who I've mentioned on my my channel, which is Rene Guénon, who it will very much influenced Evola, I mean, so his sort of interest was esotericism, and Eastern mythology, metaphysics, that sort of stuff, symbology, all that sort of stuff, and how esotericism could be placed in the West, and that sort of explains Charles's interest, King Charles's interest in Islam and stuff like that. Not so much the actual practices of making. I think the point is you have to sort of, when you read it, you understand it's not so much he wants to turn Britain into an Islamic state, but he wants the religious vitality that exists in Islam in the East to be reawakened in the West, in the form of Christianity. And I do think he's a genuine Christian. I don't think he's an atheist or anything. I think he actually is a sort of true believer. I also do think he is a traditionalist in some way. On the green stuff, I think he is a conservationist. When it comes to the, I know people will be immediately going to the idea of the what is it, the World Economic Forum, all that sort of stuff. On that, yeah, he went to World Economic Forum, but I don't know how involved he is. And also, I think you have to be careful, because I mean, the World Economic Forum it is a convention at the end of the day. It's while it is important what they say and what they do there, I guess there are more important conventions and events that probably go on that we don't know about. So it's interesting. It's interesting. He very much. I think he could be a very wise king. Given his age as well, that will be a difference, because of course Her Majesty, when she ascended the throne, she was, how old was she? Was she like 20? She was in her 20s, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was. Yes.
So,
well, if I can just say, I mean, almost the bigger thing to me seems that he looks to be potentially, and indeed has the support to be, a more proactive king, which would definitely be a very good change of pace, even if it's on issues that we might not necessarily agree with.
Yeah, totally agree with you, Ruth. But I mean, someone in the chat, I can't find it now, but said, will he restore the royal prerogative? I actually hope he does to some degree, because that was like, I don't want to get into this, because we've said we won't talk about politics around the Queen until after her funeral, which is respectful. But if I had any criticism of Her Majesty, it would be she didn't really stick up for that, and I hope Charles does.
Yeah, and also for me personally, I live not too far away from a town called Poundbury. Now, Poundbury was created entirely by Charles, and it was built in like sort of Victorian Georgian architecture. And
yeah, I like Charles's ideas on architecture. I do.
Yeah.
I think they're based. Yeah, absolutely correct.
Yeah,
he actually also has a like another group that propagates those ideas more widely. So it's like a two-pronged approach. He's pressuring that to carry on those skills and promote them, but then he's also practicing what he preaches by creating Poundbury and demonstrating the virtues of his ideas that way.
Yes.
I look. So far, he hasn't done anything ghastly. So I would just say, look, I'm going to give him a chance. He's my king, anointed by God, if you're a Christian, and yeah, I'm not going to slag him off unless he does something really bad, and he hasn't so far.
I mean, from a systemic angle, I'll say that usually a monarch has to be at least reasonably based. to survive.
Well,
So if he's going to be
was it?
proactive, if he's actually going to be proactive, he will end up probably adopting slightly more, slightly less leftist, sort of overtly leftist positions, and slightly more, nativistic and long-term thinking positions in the long run.
What was it, you said to me in DMs a couple of weeks ago? Like, the monarchy is basically. I'm trying not to misquote you here. It's basically a reactionary institution. It has to be. So we should not be against it as people on the right, particularly as British and Old Commonwealth people on the right.
No. I mean, and also in that interview that I referenced when he talks about René Guénon, he also, he went into quite detail criticizing modernity and the disconnect in the West with traditionalism. And I know there's someone in chat there saying, "Oh, well, you're using leftist phrases like marginalized communities and everything." I mean, who cares? If he has that level of understanding, which I've not heard any mainstream political figure or anything like that actually articulate in the way, because it's quite clear he does have a deep understanding of it. Okay, he uses leftist phrases. So what? One thing that is amazing is, number one, that he actually has read a bit of that, and he has that sort of view where he's actually, modernity is the problem. It is it has created this disaster that we live in today. And if he understands that traditionalism is the way we go forward here, it's because he's not like, and I know there are people on the right that like to go back and go back to like a certain point in time, like the Victorian era or what have you, and the thing there is, and people like René Guénon and Julius Evola and all these other people accepted was, well, there is no going back, but there is a way forward with traditionalism and these sets of values.
Yeah, hopefully I agree with you. Rupert, what do you think about that stuff?
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, as AI was just saying, basically, on a few of these issues, like traditionalism in particular, with regards to his knowledge on Guénon and seemingly subscribing to a lot of those principles. Yeah, I mean, he's to the right on those issues, at least, of any MP you care to name, probably even any lord you care to name. So, yeah, God save the king.
Adam, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think everything's already been said. It's really early days. Maybe this is a topic we should come back to in 6 months. I mean, I think he's going to be in there for I've heard a lot of like normies saying like, oh, he'll abdicate or he'll be gone in sort of 5 to 10 years. I don't really get where that argument's coming.
No, I don't think he'll do that at all.
I think he's probably got a good sort of 15 years in him, to be honest.
Or hopefully longer. God save the king.
Well, I mean, that's funny enough. That's another kind of thing. That's actually, no, I won't go into that because that involves a bit more the Queen. We'll talk about that next week.
I do think it's telling though that he chose his regal name to be Charles, because he didn't,
and
then thought that he would be George. And I think the choice of the name Charles is very much of his decision. But I just find it very interesting because, of course, we know with Charles I and Charles II, both of them dissolved Parliament. Both of them took the position of like, I guess you could say, like a form of absolutism, that they didn't have to bend Parliament's will and everything, and that they were the rightful lawful sovereign.
I would have fought for Charles I just because I'm a traditionalist.
Well, but both of them tried to strengthen the royal prerogative, so hopefully he stays true to his namesake.
And Charles II was wildly popular because he got rid of all the vile laws that Cromwell brought in.
Yeah.
Franz in the chat says, "I'm waiting for Cromwell III." I'd chop his head off before he even started, but that's just me. But I'm an Englishman, so therefore I'm a monarchist. Okay.
I do have to wonder, because I mean, he's always been told, like, even like there's that BBC series, that if he ever did like Charles I and stormed into Parliament with the army, with the household cavalry and everything, that it would cause civil war. I mean, let's be honest. The majority of the country at the moment would be behind him. What civil war would there be?
Yeah, none whatsoever. No.
It seems like the only people who would oppose him on that are the centre right, ironically.
And the left.
Well, good.
Well, I mean, no. A lot of the lefties are on side because the things that he's actually trying to push are, environmentalism. And I think that's
fake environmentalism, let's say, but okay.
Well, no, it might be more genuine because he's been at this game a lot longer than anybody who's more of the watermelon disposition. So the way that he's approaching it is much more like old Tory environmentalism than it is like modern.
Hedgerows and
if he doesn't support bird killing, wind farms, and all the rest of it, then I'll maybe come over to him. But we'll see.
We'll see how it goes. But point being, the people who you would naturally expect to be opposing him are not necessarily going to, because those are the people who are most enthusiastic about the policies that he's trying to push. It's a very strange situation, and that's why I think that it's quite an interesting situation for potentially being the thin end of the wedge. If he is being given the green light by popular opinion to get more involved in politics on the basis of some of these select issues that are quite popular among certain people who would naturally oppose him, then it's a very good way for him to set that precedent in the recent memory of the political system.
Well, the Laurierist is saying in the chat, "I'll give my life for Liz Truss," said no one ever. Absolutely correct. No British soldier is going to die for that vile fop Liz Truss. No one is going to.
Well, I mean, could you say that about any Democratic politician in the UK ever?
Well, not only the UK. I'd say that about everyone in America too. Did any American ever give their life for Franklin D. Roosevelt? I don't think so.
No.
Yeah.
And but I mean, obviously we've got a brilliant little series on Churchill and interwar politics that people should watch. But
coming up this Thursday, the last
part
one.
3, yeah. But even Churchill wouldn't inspire people to die for him, even under the Churchillian myths that we've had post-war.
Yeah, which were lies for the most part. I mean, Churchill was a brave soldier, without a doubt, because he fought in quite a few wars. He wasn't a coward. Anyone who says he is a liar. But he would fight for fucking Churchill.
He was a good war correspondent as well. He was a very good war correspondent.
Well, he was a good war correspondent if you were a bit liberal. But yeah, okay, fair enough.
He was a writer as well.
Yeah, no, he was a great writer. He wrote great English. He really did.
He was a man of many talents, just not the one he really wanted the most.
he dictated very good English, I should say. But he was never a great general, and certainly never a great admiral. And he got more British people killed than Adolf Hitler ever did. But there we go. Or the Kaiser, probably. So that's just my.
So John Best in chat said, "Would you die for Lord Salisbury?" Well, he is setting a tough one in front of us, but no, I'd say no.
Probably not, except that Lord Salisbury was the loyal servant of Queen Victoria, and to that extent, yeah, I would. And Lord Salisbury's first and only consideration of every single policy was, is this good for Britain and the Empire? That's all he ever cared about. And so to that extent, yes, I would.
Would you die for Disraeli? That's the real question.
No.
No. Disraeli wanted to get the Conservatives back into power, and he did. And he did so via an alliance between the aristocracy and the working people.
Yeah.
And it worked. So, all right. And when he went to the Berlin Conference, Otto Bismarck, who was not a wimp, turned around and said he's a man, that Jew. So, he got Britain Cyprus, and the two enormous crown bases on Cyprus are still very important to Britain, which are now British overseas territories, by the way, so they'll never ever be Cypriot. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm not as anti-Disraeli as some people are, but I get it. Simple Pirate is saying, watch the alcohol there, Duke. Let me tell you, mate, it is 7:44 a.m.
So he's only gotten 3 drinks in so far.
No, I haven't got any drinks in so far. I've had 1 cup of coffee, and I've got about half left in the jug. So yeah, there you go.
Sorry, but could we just look at Rory Herbert in chat here, because that sounds like one of the craziest stories of meeting Charles I've ever seen.
Well, here we go. I met King Charles in Los Angeles shortly after he went to see what the city had done for the locals who burned it down in the first place. At least he complimented me on my regimental tie. Well done, sir. Raw Biscuit says Irish coffee. No, it's just like coffee in a coffee maker. But anyway, I get this all the time. I don't know what people are even talking about. It's weird to me. Like, I have done drunk streams, but they're never at 7:46 a.m. They're usually like at about 11:50 p.m. my time. But anyway, yeah, all right. I'd like to bring us back to a subject I wanted to talk about, unless anyone has any final points to make about those things.
No, nothing from me.
All right. Hang on. Where are we? I just need to check.
Yeah, someone, but 555 said, we don't die for divisive politicians. We die for country, and that's what royals represent. Someone used the word perennial earlier, and that's kind of what I was trying to sort of dig around for earlier when I was mumbling away. Like, yeah, the royals are a reactionary institution because they are at their heart perennial. You can't sort of take that away from them. You can't extract them from it, no matter how hard you try.
Totally
I remember Bowden. I think he did like a speech with his pubs. He actually, he said that you have to remember the role of a king is they're like they're in this like they're a human celestial being in connection with God, and the ritual of that we are seeing at the moment is definitely playing out, and it's why it's really emotional to watch. I mean, a friend of mine actually went through Westminster Hall. And he's not really much of a religious person. He's not very much of a royalist person, but he lives in London and he wanted to be there just to see it because it's, of course, part of history. And he said to me, he was moved to tears. He says it was really, really, he said it felt like a religious experience in some way. And that is quite heartening to hear, because it obviously means that somewhere deep down there is that sort of natural built instinct for religiosity and everything still exists in people, even if they can't articulate it in the way that we do.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it'd be hard for some to believe, but you could actually take Prince Harry and put him on the throne, and he would become more based and more trad.
Yeah, but you'd have to get rid of his wife.
Well, I imagine that simply by the case of her being connected to someone that's on the throne, she'd probably move the same way. Might not be enough
I'm sorry.
to make him of interest.
Look,
but
Prince Harry is not King Charles's son. I think there's more than enough evidence that is true. He is the son.
Well, there isn't any evidence, but I can still believe it. So yeah, carry on.
Yeah, he's the son of a British Army officer who the vile, and I do say vile, Princess Diana had an affair with, and she had affairs with an awful lot of people.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I agree with that. She was a vile person, and what her and Blair did to the monarchy. It's definitely definitely deliberately caused problems. Having said that, though, I did see a image of a young Prince Charles in his naval uniform with a beard and everything, and at a certain angle, he did look a lot like Harry. So I don't know. I used to be a believer of that, but
no, I'm sorry, you're wrong.
I don't.
Mate. You
No,
are
no,
wrong.
I don't believe it now. I when I saw that image, I'm like, yeah.
I'm sorry, man. You're totally wrong. He doesn't look anything like. Mate, I have a half brother, so I know what I'm talking about. Trust me. This is not true. He is not King Charles's son. He is Hewitt's son, and Princess Diana had affairs with at least half a dozen people.
You don't know that.
Well, but she did. I'm sorry, she did. She was a bit of a slut. I'm sorry. That's the only thing to say about her.
Didn't she prefer though the more exotic type of men though? So wouldn't like Harry be like half caste or something?
No, but he was a soldier. He was one of her first, and he was a gallant soldier. You see, and women like gallant soldiers. Speaking as a gallant soldier, I know this to be true. But but yeah, honestly, trust me, no way is that King Charles's son.
I don't know if I believe. I don't really believe that. But okay, yeah, fine.
Well, I do. I totally believe it, and that's why he totally cucked when he married that second-rate half-caste actress who he married. So who I would I'd ban her from Britain as far as I was concerned, and I was very happy to see.
Meghan Markle.
She wasn't even allowed to go up and see the Queen when she was dying.
Good.
Quite right.
Who did you think he was talking about?
Yeah, I thought you were talking about Camilla then when you were saying like half, like sort of like.
No, I was talking about Meghan Markle.
So I thought you were about Camilla for a second. I was like, "Well, calm down there. That's your queen."
No, Meghan Markle. Listen, I have other things that I would say. Like, I will never call Camilla queen ever in my entire existence. But that's something that we will leave until after Her Majesty the Queen's funeral.
Right.
Because I have my issues with that too. But I mean, look, we've got to leave this stuff alone to some degree. Because
one thing I will say quickly, just going all the way back to a point that you made, Atman, I don't necessarily think structuralism will get you all the way. So just because you put in a position where somebody will be guided towards being based naturally, just due to the incentives of the structure, I don't think it necessarily gets them there. So maybe you could say, probabilistically, if you were to run that same scenario 100 times, then perhaps, in 40, somewhere between 40 to 60 of those cases, Harry does change his ways. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's not completely corrupted and completely committed to his ideals, regardless of what position you put him in. I think you do still need to have good men in positions where goodness is promoted. You can't just rely on the position itself to structurally guide people towards acting with good intentions.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, and I mean to that extent, I'm still expecting King Charles to be a massive letdown, but
well.
I just think it does sort of act as a bit of a funnel. They need nudging, they need pushing in some instances. You need people and institutions to direct them, but it would be easier to move a member of a royal family in our direction than it is kind of in the opposite direction if all other things are equal.
I mean,
you would think that for sure.
If needs be, when the king does his royal tour, well, I think he's in the process of doing it. If I have to meet him in person and hand him a copy of Julius Evo's Revolt Against the Modern World, like in person to him, that's then fine. That's what I'll do. What I do is I'll sort of lie to him. I'll just say, Your Majesty, there's great aspects of architecture in this book. It's right to the end, but you have to read it all the way through to understand it.
So I wouldn't do any of those things because he's my king. I'd probably just bow, not too far down. But yeah, God's Own Prototype says, I thought only blood family went and Kate didn't go either. I think Kate did go, actually. Because she's going to end up queen eventually.
From my understanding, she did go up there, but her and Camilla weren't in the room. In the room.
Oh, fine. But the point is, the vile second-rate actress who Harry made didn't even go to Scotland.
The Valley Girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. All right, guys. Last subject, and this was the one I put up in the Discord. I'd like to change it because we've been very American for a lot of this stream, and we just did a few minutes on the royal family, although we have to be careful because we're not going to do political stuff on the royal family until after Her Majesty's funeral. Although I would just like to say one thing about that before we go on. I was watching the British Forces TV, British Forces news stuff on YouTube about this, and there's enormous numbers of chicks pulling the Queen's carriage and a very strategically placed black guardsman. And that's all I'm going to say on that, but we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks' time. But anyway, apart from that, I think there is a big difference between the way men and women look at the world comparatively. And they have different worldviews, they have different goals and different interests. And I would be interested to see what our panel this evening think about that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how to approach this. This definitely isn't my wheelhouse. I'll leave it to someone else, I think, to kick this off.
Go for it, guys. Anyone. Are we the same? Because we're not, obviously.
No. Men and women are entirely different. Again, you could go back to any ancient old civilization. It's why young boys and girls are somewhat segregated. When they're raised together, young men were taught how to behave around women, and it was also women were taught how to behave around men. That was sort of also like the arranged marriage as well, as sort of preparation. So there is like some ancient wisdom there that there was. Yes, men and women are completely different. I think also in behavior and characteristic, I think women are, if they wanted to be there, if there was going to be any sort of aggressive nature, they're more passive aggressive. So they'll be using words, and they tend to be a bit more spiteful and everything in their words and everything. Men are a bit more direct and may get physical and more. They don't. It's not so much like as sort of bitchy and everything. Let's say. I also think, apart from like the more sort of masculine and feminine approaches, I think, they are quite different. I think also there's plenty of studies out there that ever since, what was it, the 40s or 50s, 40s and 50s, women in the West are becoming more and more depressed. More of them are like on antidepressants. There's a high rate of suicide, mainly down to that they aren't having. Women are getting older and older before they have children, and they're not.
They're not having kids. They don't have a man to look after them, and they end up dying alone with their cats eating them. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that has had a really bad effect on them because, of course, there's also the biological aspect that a man at any age can have a child beyond puberty. They can have a child. With a woman, it's limited time. It's time sensitive.
Totally agree. Yeah.
So.
Totally agree.
So, of course, their outlook is that they may be looking ahead or something. They meant that, and that's why maybe that the woman is more eager to settle down and have families if they are looking to have a family. So, yeah, I think, I mean, but again, this is the sort of symptom and problem in our society why we've become quite an civilizational force with feminism, Marxism, and all the other bits. It's sort of led women down this lie, the garden path of lies, to believe that that we are all equal and that we are all the same. And I think I'm actually more at the belief now that everyone on the right, we should now all commit to inequality. We have to be inequality absolutists in all sense.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I've always agreed with that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, my favorite definition of what the right even is an embrace of hierarchy rather than equality, which is the left's domain.
Well said, Rupert. Well said.
Yeah, probably a better terminology, but yeah, I like saying inequality because it's a good word on Twitter when someone says you're against inequality. Yes, I am. Yes.
Well, it's a negative though, rather than a positive. Whereas
yes, it is
a hierarchy can contain a positive component, because you can have a hierarchy of competencies, and that's entirely legitimate. And very few people would say that that's a bad thing.
Yes.
Yeah, totally agree. Artman, anything to add at the moment? Because we're going to go on about this for at least another 30 minutes, I hope.
Oh God. Yeah, I had something, but it's gone for now. I do think that a lot of this stuff will unravel. Like, I mean, you see it. I mean, I don't go on dating websites, and I haven't been on there for a while. But I'd go on them like a few years back, and you'd see like women on there who are sort of fast approaching their 40s, and they're still saying like, "Oh, kids someday," and it's like, okay, but that clock's ticking. And I do think a lot of this will unravel in, I think, the next 10 years within that time frame, because you're gonna have a lot of sort of millennial women, especially, who are gonna suddenly realize that they've all left it a bit too late, and that's gonna hit pretty close to home. You're already seeing it now. I think one of the writers for Sex and the City, I believe, came out recently and said that she had like big regrets because she was
the creator of the whole series.
Was that what she was doing? Okay.
Yeah, she was the creator of the whole series, and so no, I was wrong.
Well, yeah, so essentially perpetuating that sort of IQ shredder propaganda to sort of like millions of women.
The sexual liberation movement has destroyed women.
I mean, it's kind of it's destroyed and humiliated them as well, because you can tell that they didn't lose the sex wars, but you can tell they didn't win it, because they now do pole dancing for exercise, right?
Yeah. And like, if you look at everything the military does and all the rest of it, like, the only thing women can do today is be inferior men.
Yeah.
It's the only thing open to them. Be an inferior man. They can't be a woman anymore. Although, to be fair, there are some base women who are working out, being feminine and being an actual woman is actually much more attractive to based men.
Yeah.
I've just been reminded as well that a point that I often bring up is that they're essentially speed running, trying to reinvent traditional relationship norms. Like, I remember specifically that seeing a thing where a bunch of feminists who were feminists who wrote for some sort of publication, and they were basically saying that, the problem with like just shagging around is that that man doesn't have any commitment to you, and maybe there should be some sort of formal contract whereby they have to commit themselves to you. It's like, okay, yeah, brilliant. We'll sign this with a piece of precious metal that he can give you as a down payment, and we'll call it marriage.
Oh, there's another good one in that vein, actually, where there's been the reinvention of certain completely normal intimacy practices, but framed as fetishes. So the desire to have children is now framed as a fetish for women. The desire to have like a romantic attachment before engaging in intimacy is now framed as a fetish, or like a sexuality. Oh god, what else? What else was there? There was another one that was just completely outrageous. But yeah, just completely conventional intimate relations can now be framed as fetishes. So it's okay to have those proclivities again.
Yeah. See, the more and more with this unravels, the more and more I become more sympathetic with the morality police in Iran.
Dying Duke?
Sorry, I missed that last bit because I was typing to somebody.
Sorry, I said the more and more this unravels, the effects of the sexual revolution, the more and more I sympathise with the morality police in Afghanistan and Iran.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
But I can understand their concern, because remember, Iran and Afghanistan, especially Afghanistan recently, was very much heavily influenced by America, and when you have those ideas from America permeating in your country, I can see why they went to great length to remove it, because it is, I mean, yeah, we've heard, slippery slope is real, guys, and it's okay. First, it starts off with taking the head coverings off, and then it becomes it's fetishization to be reproducing Afghan kids. So I can see why they went along the lines of banning it. And yes, is this a women haters club? Yes, it is.
Well, I mean, in the case of Iran, it was the same, where the same kinds of morality were being pushed from the top down in all sorts of spheres. In fact, they even God, what do they call it? They might call it like the White Revolution or something like that. It was like literally a top down revolution is how they framed it.
Yeah, and it forced a lot of people from the peasants or rural peasants into the towns and cities, which arguably probably created the revolution ultimately that would topple the Shah. I mean, I don't like the idea the Shah was toppled, but at the same time, if he wasn't an American puppet, I don't think that would have happened personally. But
well, if he hadn't tried to westernize so hard against the grain of his own people and power structures of his own country and against his own culture, then he probably would have had a much easier time staying in power. But there we are.
Your Majesty, King Charles, if you're watching this, learn.
Please. One other thing I would say about the women is that, based on what I've seen historically, especially in the case of the mid-century Germans, is that women tend to be much better at adapting to whatever the current popular social movement is, or like political movement as well. So women were some of the most fervent supporters of the government at the time. And then, obviously, when it was completely discredited and no longer acceptable in polite society to ascribe to that view, all of a sudden, they're some of the most vociferous condemners of that particular government. Obviously, it's not the same people, but it's quite an interesting phenomenon. I think in general, you could probably make a good case that women are very good survivors, much more so than men, who are more clustered at the various fringes and try to shoot for the moon or die trying.
Yeah, women are moral enforcers. I think back to, if you look back to the conversion of Constantine to Christianity, the people in his life that were the people that, I guess, embedded Christianity into his mindset came from his sister and his mother, and from other sort of influence in that end. And if you look at the conversion of Christianity in Anglo-Saxon England, while it was top down from the missionaries and people from the Franco going to the King of Kent and all that sort of stuff, a lot of it was done via the people who enforced the missionary work afterwards. It was done via women. It was same with political ideology, whether it be the mid-century Germanism. Women played a very big part in that role, enforcing on the home front. Same with communism and other ideologies like that. It's true, and it's why we have I'd also say, if you remember the BLM stuff in 2020, that's why you had so many insufferable white women, blonde-haired white women, joining up with diversity such to promote the BLM narrative. It's because those sorts of people are, and unfortunately, if Basic King Charles does turn out to be Basic King Charles and does away with the illegitimate democratic parliament that's in place, those are the sorts of people who would we would have to depend on for enforcing whatever comes from the top down. But
one thing I would say though is that it doesn't necessarily pay to, well, not in my view anyway, to dislike or especially not to hate women for this position that they sort of have, especially in the case of things like BLM, because they've kind of always had this role in political society, and I think it's why, basically the Conservatives quite often pushed female suffrage as a counterweight to the higher propensity for socialism and atheism among male electorates, because they were a stabilizing force for mainstream society. Look,
I'm not at all against what Jobu accused us of here. Another episode of the Woman Haters Club. I don't hate women, Jobu. I don't know where you get this idea. I think women are absolutely lovely, and so long as they're reasonably attractive, they're very cute. They're certainly essential to human evolution and development. I don't hate them at all, but the idea that we should all become feminized is ridiculous, mate.
Yeah, this is essentially what I'm saying now, is to caution against that idea, because hypothetically, if we were to take power, then they would probably just as quickly switch over and suddenly act as though they were, supporters.
Yeah, of course
they would do the same. Yeah, and this is the thing is, I'm not. When I said they're insufferable, the BLM people, the ones that BLM insufferable, that's just my personal ground with them. I've come to terms, let's say, especially like reading people I've read that on like elite theory and everything, that these women would ultimately come on our side if our people were in charge. And so have I accepted that. Same if I've accepted that men and women are different. That there is in your words. There is a hierarchy. We are actively all unequal. We are different in all ways. So now I've accepted that. I think the problem with a lot of the incel people that I know of is they can't really get their heads around that women. They're basically, it's like the anti-liberal position or the anti-egalitarian position, or not anti-egalitarian. It's the egalitarian position, which is different from that's sort of juxtaposed from the sort of common stance of they believe that men and women should be equal, but they can't understand why women behave in the way that they don't behave. And I think that's the problem with the incel community, is they can't also accept that men and women are not equal. And I just think the incels are just they're stuck in the sort of leftist worldview in that area.
Could I just say, men and women are not equal, okay, but more importantly, they're not the same. That's the main thing I'm trying to get across here.
Do you want a really black-pilling point on this topic?
Well, just before, can we have a quick white pill? I suppose that the last comment that Jobu left. I'm off to enjoy a healthy relationship with my woman. Yeah.
There we go.
We should all aspire to such things, and I'll be looking forward.
I've never had a healthy relationship with my woman. That's why I have a son in his 20s. But
No, it's the right attitude to have. We should. Then we're not the same as women. We shouldn't pretend that we are the same as women.
No,
and we should especially be able to approach women where they are, not where we wish them to be.
I kind of agree with that. I don't like the idea, like all this fantasy DR stuff about, women in white summer dresses running through cornfields is bollocks. Of course it is. We all know that.
It's a bit larpy.
It's hugely larpy.
It's another kind of ideal, and if we can all, it's something to maybe push for, especially being able to signal that it's something that we like. If women want to be able to embody that archetype for us, much as the the 1950s housewife was an archetype and an ideal that we're all so that we're often so taken with. And, even women themselves, the ideal.
I will say this: I've seen a lot of women, especially in my workplace and just out and about, wearing the sort of trad wife summer dress this summer, more so than usual.
I don't know where the fuck they're selling them, but they are really getting about.
Good. It's nice.
Oh yeah, no, that's good. I'm happy to hear it. I mean, women look kind of cute in summer dresses.
I mean, it's just like, I remember like the last few years, you have like girls as young as 15 wearing like hot pants and everything, and it's just it's just I just can't go outside.
Listen, I am never going to be against women with good legs wearing mini skirts. If they want to wear mini skirts and mini dresses and they are in good shape and have good legs, great, do it. No problem with that. Like, I'm not so traditional that I think that is bad. Because I think that's ridiculous. It just is ridiculous.
No, I think they need to. I think we need to cover. They need to cover up like as much as possible and make the concept.
So you're an Islamist, are you?
Yeah, showing the knee down is haram. Everyone knows this.
Yeah, sorry, man. I'm not going to ever agree.
We need to remythicize sex. We have to go through like an extreme approach to get there. So yeah, I think covering the head and the knee. Well, not the whole head. No. I'm not.
Oh, for God's sake, no! I'm not an Islamist. I'm not going to do it, man.
Ashen Duke and Ben Gale are both making the same fundamental good point, which is that we're kind of helping to make the trad wife look to be the trad wife look, and hopefully at some level the trad wife ethic to be something that is aspirational again, and that is fundamentally a good thing.
I don't even think that's true. Cool Chickens says the boomer is emerging in me. I don't know how, because I'm not a boomer, but
no. Duke, can I push back on that a second? Because I like, for one thing, my own girlfriend is kind of has been influenced by this sentiment, and it's been a very pleasant thing for my life. So I don't think that it's a thing that is only surface level, or something that even doesn't exist at all in any meaningful sense. It definitely exists. It's influencing some amount of women, and it is a good thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying it isn't. All I'm saying is, let's not go for the white Sharia thing, because I just think that's crazy.
And I know that your chap seems to agree with me in some way. So I don't know. It's
just a shame we're not pro-democracy.
I love democracy.
I do too. I love democracy.
The constitutional republic.
So I love democracy, if only it wasn't mostly an illusion. D. Reverend in the chat says nuns aren't Islamists, though. Yeah, but
good point.
I'm not sure that going out with a nun is a possibility, really. If you're a bloke, I mean.
We could force women to wear habits. That could be or encourage them.
We could do that, but I'm not sure it would be a good idea. But yeah, we could. But what I'm saying is, actual nuns are not really good dating goals.
Well, you're all mocking me about Islamo-Angloism and everything, but our current king supports it. So don't mock, because otherwise you're mocking the king, and you're all traitors if you do that. So,
yes,
yeah, there you go.
So I'm somewhere between. We're slagging off all women, according to Jobu, and on the other hand, I like women a bit too much, which is probably true. Actually, I probably am somewhere between those two. That's probably where I am, and I think that's where most men are, really. And this is half the problem. Like, your average young man, when he's a young man, Like women are his a number one priority, rightly or wrongly. It's true for most men. All right, maybe not for some, but for the vast majority it is. And so you will hear women saying, "Oh, all these trad men, they just want these trad thoughts who are pretending to be would-be trad wives on the internet. And if they marry them, then they'll never achieve anything." Which I can see that. But on the other hand, you also have the fact that in traditional history, going right back to ancient times, the vast majority of men were married and achieved many things. So, and then on the other hand, compared to that, you have I'm going to speak to you in a minute, Joe. On the other hand, you have on the other hand to that, you have the ridiculous situation we have today, where many people on the right think any bloke who is telling you, like for example, Red Hawk, how to pick up a chick or start a conversation with a chick or get a girlfriend is somehow bad. It's another example, as far as I'm concerned, of the right wing being schizophrenic and spending more time fighting each other than we do our real enemies. But what do you do to think about
that? Yeah, I mean, I suppose so. Yeah, but I'm not sure.
Rory Herbert is saying, my wife was abused by nuns when at school. Well, my mother, who was born in Southern Ireland, although her father was a Welshman who'd been in the RAF in World War II, also went to a Catholic school run by nuns and had the shit beaten out of her there and hated them all her life. So I can agree with you, Rory Herbert. From particular cases, I'm sure it wasn't always true, but yeah, sometimes it was. Jobu is saying tradition is buying into a ball gab at a BDSM club. Jobu, you see, this is how you don't know me at all, mate, because I detest BDSM clubs, but okay. The only time I've ever been to BDSM clubs, let me think, 3 times in my life, or maybe 4. Was when my girl wanted to go there. I hate them. So you're completely wrong.
But you still went back twice.
It's about 3 or 4 times more.
No. These were different. Yeah.
See, this is why this is okay. I'm now okay. The Sharia police is needed. I'm now fully convinced after being on this panel that we need Sharia police in the West.
Okay, well, let me say these were different women. So the only time I've ever been to one of those places was when a woman wanted me to go there. And actually, do you know what? I could almost say the same, about strip clubs. The only time I've been to those was when a woman wanted me to go there.
Yes. Yeah. This is the thing. The sexual liberation has turned women into living embodiments of the whores of Babylon, and so what needs to be done is we need an army of Vestal virgins to shame I hate to say it, but in Islamic sort of Sharia police style, to shame them out of such hedonistic practices.
Wow,
that isn't pure.
If you say so, I mean. Okay. Franz says leather duke. No, mate, I hate that shit. I've had one leather jacket in my life. It was made in Italy, and I really liked it. Only one I've ever had. So I hate leather shit. I hate all of that crap. Really do detest it.
Loafer Sheffield has the right idea.
Who?
Loafer Sheffield.
Oh, here we go. What's he got to say? Oh, okay. Well done. Well done, Lothar. Well done, Lothar Fairfield. That would actually piss off those words. But yeah, okay.
Anyway, I'm going to have to leave you guys to it. So,
yeah, I'm going to head off as well in a bit. So,
all right. Right, I'll see you all later then. Anyway.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
We'll finish by the half hour anyway.
All right.
But yeah.
Yeah, good night.
Good night.
Thanks for coming on. God. Okay, guys. I don't know. We've got a bit off track here, right? But yeah. Final thoughts.
Well, there was one comment that's a bit further back. So someone, I can't remember who said it, but someone said that they didn't think women were worth the effort. Which, yeah, I definitely don't think that. I think they can sort of add a lot to your life again if you're willing to meet them where they are, and women and men both have a lot to offer each other and can make up for certain shortcomings that each other have. So, it's definitely
totally agree.
It's definitely a very enriching thing to have a good woman in your life.
I am sort of terrified, like, I guess, with future younger generation. Well, I say younger, like maybe like 7 years younger than me, generations coming through where a lot of girls are going to be on OnlyFans or would have been on OnlyFans and stuff like and sites like that. Because
so they're whores, basically.
Yeah, but it's not like if it was like 1-2%. I mean, as much as I know, I'd like to say about introducing Sharia police and everything. I would accept that even in those sort of societies, prostitution still exists in some form or aspect because it's the world's oldest profession. As long as it's not treated as a virtue in society, I'm okay with that if it exists. If it's
getting married for a couple of hours. That's
yeah,
how I get around it, I think.
In Iran, they do that in Iran. You have to get married and then you get divorced.
Yes, but I think the problem is that I've seen really like especially during the lockdowns, these really worrying stats of like in the some countries, like some Western countries. I don't know about the UK, but like in parts of America, there was like one state, like Oregon, it was like 30% of women aged something like 18 to 24 or something were involved with OnlyFans, and it's like, oh dear.
I'd be more worried, to be honest with you, AI, about the fact that the people who overwhelmingly supported the lockdowns were women.
Yeah, well, it goes back to the moral influences of what we mentioned earlier. I mean, we wasn't surprised. I know in Australia you had it particularly bad with I imagine the government over there, because I know the lockdowns in Australia was
the dictator down in Melbourne and Victoria.
Yeah,
did the longest lockdowns in the whole wide world,
and I imagine the women
as a socialist, and almost all his supporters were women or feminist men.
Yeah, and I bet they were enforcing it with such like zealous vigor and everything else.
Man, they used the anti-terrorist police, they used armored vehicles, they used tear gas, they used rubber bullets, they even sprayed tear gas into the face of like women in their 70s who were protesting against it.
Yeah.
As after they'd knocked them to the ground. It was disgusting. And it's all gone away now.
But at least women have got the right to vote and stand in election.
Until after the election. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Well, yes, as I just said, universal suffrage, wasn't it great? I do think, though, I do wonder that could, I mean, because women are more suggestible and easily led when it comes to agreed positions in society and everything. Are they? I mean, are they actually capable of voting? Because this is the problem with democracy as a whole, and this is probably why a lot of people on the right have turned off from democracy, because the problem with at least in the sort of Greek civilizational form of democracy, I mean, it was only like certain groups of people could vote. You know, people actually had stakes in the society.
Yeah, well, basically, free men could vote, and that was it in Athens, for example. Yeah, totally agree. Like, women will vote, as Pierce Brosnan says in the chat, for what makes them feel safer or what they perceive that makes them feel safer. They don't take risks, and they just look at, and also they're about feelings, not facts.
Yes.
That's just what women are. I mean, one of the things that Red Hawk, who I like and I've streamed with, is totally right about is that if you're a man on the right and you want to get yourself a woman, you know, you want to get yourself a girlfriend and make her your woman and eventually your wife, you have to make it yourself. And the vast majority of women will fall into line with the political and other beliefs that a man they admire and look up to has. They just will. That's just what women are like.
Yeah. On the political side, yes, but I think one thing that, like, there's some very good advice that I heard somewhere, who knows where, but I've seen it repeated often enough, which is that if you envision your perfect woman and then imagine where your perfect woman would be, then you have to meet her there. You can't expect to find your good, chaste Christian woman hanging around bars.
No, that's true. That's true. But also, you can meet a woman with slightly differing views to yourself, and over a year or two, or you can, if she admires you and looks up to you, and you can tell when a woman does that as a man, she will change her opinions to fit in with yours. That's just what women do. Yeah. They just do that. It's natural to them. And if they won't, then you shouldn't have anything to do with her in the first place. I mean, if she's like a dyed-in-the-wool left winger, then like ignore her anyway.
Well, I mean, as you said, that probably means she doesn't entirely respect you.
Yeah, exactly. Look, you can tell if a woman looks up to you and respects you, and like thinks, oh yeah, he's my bloke and he's a good bloke. It's absolutely true that they will adapt their own views to yours. They always will, and it's been true of women going back to the ancient world. It's a survival technique for women because, like, you know, if your ancient sea was captured by the enemy, the blokes would mostly be killed, and the women and children would all be enslaved. That's what happened, always.
Yeah. I've got to go now, Iron Duke. My dog wants to go out, so I will.
No worries, man. I've got a little dog, so you know, good on you, man. Good on. Thank you very much for joining the stream. Did you have anything you wanted to show before you left?
No, just go check out my channel, AI Shiatori. You'll find a few. One of my streams has gone to 1,000 views, so with Apostolic Majesty. Skyrim Elder Scrolls stream, so check that out. That's
cool. There's also AI, before you go out with your little dog, do me a favor, stick that link in the Discord and I'll put it in the description later on.
Cool, thank you so much.
No worries. Okay, like I said, we've already going to go for less than 2 minutes now. Anything you wanted to show, Rupert?
Yes, I have an article coming out in the Mallard, I believe, later this month on the ethics of Ivan Ilyich, which I think is quite informative to how we should potentially view moral issues on the right and how that should perhaps inform some of our ethics. And other than that, I am on a stream on Tuesday talking about English Restoration and English Revivalism with Nathan Hood.
Cool. I like Nathan Hood. He's a good chap.
Yeah, very good guy.
Please, again, stick it in the Discord on my links thing, and I'll stick it in the description for the video.
Yep, that should be from 7 to 9 p.m. So,
all right, mate. Like I said, stick it in the Discord on the my channel stuff, and I'll put it in the description for this stream.
Will do. But yeah,
cool,
thanks for having me on.
Oh man, you're always welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. I am going to also show a couple of things. Where am I? First thing I'm going to show is in just over an hour, please go and watch The Distributist, who's going to be talking to another of my favorite streamers, Franklin from Australia. I'm just putting the link in the chat. Go and check that stream out. I think it will be good. Dave, the Distributist, is an excellent dude, and so is the Franklin. So that should be pretty good. I'm not going to put it in the comments, mate. It's too much fucking around, but I will put it in the description of the stream after the stream is finished. So yeah, we'll do that. And I'm going to play us out with a tune, as I always do.
Have you heard the talk of foreign powers building ships increasingly? Do you know they watch this isle of ours, watch their chance unceasingly? Have you heard the millions they will spend strengthening their fleets and why? They imagine they can break or bend the nation that has often made them fly. But one thing we possess, they forget. The lads in blue they met, often met. Sons of the sea, all British born, sailing every ocean, laughing foes to scorn. They may build their ships, my lads, and think they know the game, but they can't breed boys of the bulldog breed who made old England's name. Sons of the sea, all British born, sailing every ocean, laughing foes to scorn. They may build their ships, my lads, and think they know the game, but they can't breed boys of the bulldog breed who made old England's name.
Okay, ladies and gents, I think that's our stream for this week. I would just like to say Thank you to my guests for joining me. I will be putting the links to their various stuff in the description later on. In the meantime, on Thursday this week, Thursday in the Northern Hemisphere, that is, we will be having our third and final British foreign policy stream, 1914-1942, with Horace and Adam. So come and join us for that. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give the stream a like if you liked it. And go well, folks.